Do you hear the rocks moving? Every day, rocks falling down this hill. This mountain is moving. It's so cool being out here. I love being in nature for a long period of time. Being able to get in sync with nature, find the pace of nature. It's a lot slower than the pace we're normally in inner city life. Especially a city like LA. Oh man, after spending years in LA, like the pace of daily life there's just so fast. Time in nature allows us to change that pace to a lot healthier pace for the human body and mind. When I was a little kid, I was fascinated with technology. I loved the most advanced technologies, reading popular science, seeing what new things were being created, and what's on the verge, what's on the edge, what's just beyond our reach technologically, and following that, and I was born in the mid '80s, so I was really a kid of the '90s, and um, I was homeschooled. That was really weird. I was homeschooled by a really, really spiritual mother. I was homeschooled by a very religious single mother. Um, Unfortunately, at the time when I was young, I didn't know how to recognize and definitely not nearly know how to describe um, the abusive atmosphere that I was in. It was an emotionally abusive atmosphere. It was a psychologically abusive atmosphere. Um, and unfortunately, it eventually became a physically abusive atmosphere. When I was, I think, 16, I was physically beat up by my stepfather so badly that he was arrested, taken to jail, and the state of Georgia removed custody from my, my stepfather and my mother. I was um, I was just going into my senior year of high school, and in a small town, in a small school, that's a big deal. Like all my friends are there. I've been on the sports teams for years, um, and to avoid having to leave and go to a different school somewhere else, I was kind of adopted by my best friend and his family, so that I could continue to go to the same school and finish out my high school career and just move on and go to college and kind of hopefully put that issue and just let it be behind me. Unfortunately, it wouldn't be that easy to just ignore a history of abuse or to just pretend like things didn't happen and move on. You see, what happens in an emotionally abusive, psychologically abusive, especially the physically abusive and the sexually abusive family relationships, traumatic psychological damage happens to where an individual's psyche can become fractured and literally create divisions within itself, that the conscious sense of identity, kind of the locus of identity, kind of moves to that fragmented segment of the psyche, so that sector of the personality can deal with the trauma of the scenario. And then once the trauma's gone, the other areas of the psyche can kind of become the dominant character. An unfortunate amount of that happens in traumatic, abusive families. And as children of abusive families grow up, those psychological fractions become kind of solidified into stone, and habitual patterns emerge. It becomes really hard to change these habitual patterns, that can be very unhealthy, that can be very hard to deal with. It becomes very hard to change these later on in the future if you never process the emotions, recognize the scenarios that led to major trauma, process the feelings that need to be felt, have the conversations that need to be had, gain the perspectives that need to be gained to teach yourself how to deal with people. It generally comes down to people who allow themselves to be compelled by wicked forces and do wicked things. I don't know how to tell people that whether there is a good and bad or why there is a right and wrong, but there are things that I experience in this life that seem so horrific. They seem to me, I describe it as naturally wrong. Some things I just know are wrong. And when I see people do these things, some people seem so wholeheartedly compelled by this horrific nature of wrongdoing, treating people, sexually abusing small children who have no capacity to defend themselves. That is so horrific and so traumatic and so devastating. Everything in my being tells me it is wrong. That is bad. That is evil. But at the same time, I battle this stance of, is the person bad, or is the person have the potential to also be good, but they are just allowing themselves at that time to be compelled by wicked forces? I tend towards the latter because I've seen people who have committed horrific acts, who have been compelled by wicked forces and done horrific things wholeheartedly, unabashedly. I've seen those same people later turn around to repent from their actions. These are men who are in jail, who've been in jail, who've been in prison for a long time, who've done horrific things, and they've been in jail and actually now speak to right and wrong in life. They give testimony to what they believe is good living, what is bad living, and they're some of the most inspiring people to listen to because they have learned a major lesson. They have actually revolved tremendously. They still have to stay in prison because what they've done is so bad they need to stay away from society, locked away. But in their hearts and in their minds, they have actually grown to learn a tremendous lesson that everyone in society needs to learn. And it is a lesson of discernment between good and evil, right and wrong. It takes that discernment so that we can recognize things that are good and loving and promote those things. So that we can recognize those things that are bad and evil and exercise those things, cast them out, cut them out of our society. That's my desire anyway. The more individuals in a society that begin to operate without integrity, without authenticity, that operate dishonestly, the more individuals like that in a society, the farther I will try to isolate myself from that society. I do not care to interact with people who do not value moral ethics, virtue. People who are not concerned with living with integrity, operating honestly. Those people I find are very toxic people and tend to make my life more difficult experience. And I think it's important to not simply cut those people off because they're either embodying wickedness or promoting evil or doing things that are detrimental and devastating and hurtful to others. But at least they have to be, their impact has to be maintained, has to be, you know, subdued. But at the same time, in the battle is to give the individual the opportunity to recognize and turn from their wicked ways. That is what forgiveness is, and that is what it means to love someone. I don't know how that looks in society for us to operate like that as a whole, politically, governmentally, but I know what it looks like on an individual scale, personally, interpersonally. I know what it feels like interpersonally to forgive someone who has done wrong to me. I told you I experienced not only physical abuse from my stepfather growing up. I experienced emotional and psychological abuse, tremendous emotional and psychological abuse from my mother. But the only way that I can have a fulfilling internal experience in life, moving on, is it only comes from learning to forgive them. If I maintain hatred towards them for what they've done in the ways that they did not meet my standards of what I think is right living, what I think is a good way to treat your children. They didn't maintain what I think are good standards. But if I maintain hatred towards them for that, I will continue to live with this toxic feeling inside of me the rest of my life, which not only affects me and my mentality, it seeps into everything I do and people I interact with. The only way for me to experience fulfillment and excitement and joy and vibrance and love and share that with other people, the only way for me to do that is to continually forgive those people that do wrong to me. Now, that being said, when people continue to do wrong to you, it's important to put an end to that. And it's very important to learn how to create healthy boundaries. That's a very important thing to do. And unfortunately, we don't teach that in academia. We don't even teach that in... It's a lot of things we don't teach in academia. But unfortunately, that's one of the most important things that we need to be teaching our children. Because most of our parents in 2017 are actually adults who were children of abusive families who didn't quite know how to handle it. Their parents didn't know how to deal with it. They didn't know how to deal with it, and they're doing the best they can, and they're kind of passing on some of those traits to their children, and their children. That's the nature of the world we live in. Everyone needs to recognize that we all have areas that need to be addressed and dealt with in a conscious and loving way to grow into the most respectful people that we can be, to have the most respectful community that we can have. The beautiful thing about America specifically is the diversity it allows for. We can believe and do and say totally different things from each other. I can believe completely different things about the world than my fellow citizen does. That's one of the beautiful things about America that still exists. But that's what's beautiful about America, is that we can believe different things and profess different things and live totally different lifestyles and be neighbors. But it's important that we're respectful of each other to do that. It's important for us to learn how to respect other people for having different views and allow them to be and live in love and joy with their view of the world without judging or condemning them. We need to be able to forgive those people who allow themselves to be compelled by wickedness. We need to be able to forgive them so that we don't live in a state of toxic hate. But we also need to learn how to create healthy boundaries. To respect those that are different than us, but to suppress the influence and effect of those people that do continue to operate in wickedness. I was really excited by technology when I was a kid, and as it was developing in the 90s with the emergence of the internet and mobile technology with the capacity to record my life and share my experience with others and find others of like mind. It was especially wonderful for somebody like me because my immediate family members were really abusive and hard, and the people in my direct life were really not a comfortable community for me. And I found family. I found people who treated me with respect, people who were interested in what I had to say, people who thought that things that were unique about me were awesome. I found family in non-local community on the internet. In the baby stage of the internet in the 90s, I used to go to the library with a magazine I had that had URLs, different websites you could go to, and I would type in these URLs and go to these websites, and other people around me were like, "How do you know where to go? How do you know where to go to these websites?" And then the emergence of forums, communities, and I found amazing community in this strange non-local thing that is the internet. It is one of the beautiful things about technology that allows us to connect with each other, that it can allow a child in an abusive family to recognize the psychological emotional abuse that they are facing and to find help to get them out of that situation. That is one of the beautiful things about the mobile digital technology that we have. It's been very hard for me over my life to use this technology to share my story because my story has been a very painful story of a history of abuse and betrayal and treachery that has caused pain and there was sexual abuse from my grandfather sexually abused not only his children but also his grandchildren. The psychic fractioning that was already in place in the family that I was born into was horrid. And there was so much pain that I didn't even understand for decades. And then I'm trying to figure out from broken people why they operate the way that they do. It's been very hard for me to tell my story, but I think it's important that I share this with you, because it's important for people to recognize what is very prevalent in our society, the abuse, the trauma that is prevalent in our society. It's important for us to recognize that. It's important for us to create a community network for support for those that are traumatized by abuse on a regular basis. It's important for us to reach out to create a supportive network to get those people out of abuse, and to connect them with those of like mind that can teach them the good ways to operate, ways to create healthy boundaries, ways to deal with the trauma, process the emotion and abuse, and learn how to live a fulfilling life of happiness and joy, internal vibrance, despite the trauma, the post-traumatic PTSD that you might continually experience, ways to heal that. It's important to connect with a community that can help support you in that. I've been very fortunate to be able to pay a professional psychologist to spend time with me to help me process this. Unfortunately, the practice, the professional practice of psychology today in 2017 is not up to par with the where digital technology and social networks and the internet allows us to be connected and share with each other. I think it's important that we reach out and share our stories, and I want you to know who I am, what I've been through, what I've learned. I'm Justin Kenneth Martin. This is my story. Much love to you guys that I've connected with over the years on the internet through these strange freaking black mirror that I'm staring at. It's such a weird tool, and it's created such a strange phenomenon in society for us to talk to the ether in this way that is connecting to this non-local community of people we may or may not know, may eventually meet or may not, that may have tremendous impact from what we have to share, or may never know us, or may totally disagree with us and think we're stupid as fuck. It's a strange and beautiful phenomenon. And I love those people that I have connected with, because they are one of the reasons why I'm still around smiling today, despite a tremendous amount of pain that I've been through. And I want to reflect that love back to you guys. I want the best thing I can do with my life is create a supportive community that helps those people that are dealing with trauma and abuse, from people that you might love, that you love, and it's so hard to recognize because you care about somebody and they treat you badly, and you just don't know it. The best thing I can do with my life is create a supportive network that helps people recognize that in their lives, so know what to do. I love technology. It can be a double-edged sword, though. When you create the ship, you also create the shipwreck. But I want to help people learn how to sail their boat into the beautiful sunset. Peace and love. See you guys on the flip side.